right, so we are live. I see Timo's in the chat.
Timo.
Hello, chat. I'm James Craig, science fiction author, but we're not here to talk about my book. I brought on a guest because I've been told that maybe I'm a little too negative in my reviews at times. Carrow, thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. I remember when you said that you were reading the book, I had it in my TBR, and I was like, I will read it with you. Let's go.
Right on. I like reading books with other people. It lets you talk about them. That's like most of the reason I started the book club thing, which, by the way, anyone tuning in this month is Frankenstein, which is allegedly a very good book. I haven't actually cracked it open. I have 1 week to read this before the live stream. So I'm a fast reader, okay? You see how fast I put out reviews.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I also like trying to support the YouTubers that I follow and consume their content of, because like I am a YouTube premium person, but that's even if I watch everything they put out, they get like 10 cents from me.
Mm-hmm.
So I do recognize that buying merchandise from a YouTuber, actually they notice the support there.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of part of why I picked up Dark Harvest by Will Jordan, who is of course Critical Drinker.
Mm-hmm.
On the back flap if you don't believe me. Actually pretty good. Just like the short version. I enjoyed the book. What about you?
I think it should have been a movie. That's my thought.
Yes, okay. I know exactly what you mean. This desperately wanted to be a movie, and I think that is because Critical Drinker makes his money by reviewing movies. His brain is saturated by movies. He judges everything by the standards of how to make a good movie, and I suspect he doesn't have the time to read books. Because that dude puts out a lot of content. I think his brain is very lopsided towards movie logic.
Yeah, I really liked, so I should probably let everybody know that I've got like a weird bias because I was in the military. So when all the military stuff kind of goes on, like, you know, like that hyper like lens kind of pops in, like, I don't think it quite happened that way, my man. But so there's a little bit of that was going in there, but there was like, I could almost see it like written as a screenplay. Like it really kept jumping out at me. Like this could have been like a fantastic screenplay. And it even met like all like the story beats that would have happened in a movie. How many spoilers are we doing? I didn't even ask you.
So I always spoil books.
Okay,
Although
I
I
just
will
want to make
typically
sure.
try to dance around the ending if I'm telling people to read the book. I don't think we can avoid talking about the ending, except we can avoid the final spoiler, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
By the way, Drink with Crazy is in the chat. Hello, thank you for joining.
Get your wife a coat.
Okay, when we get to the end of the stream, you have to catch me up on that channel lore. I don't understand why everyone's telling him to get a goat.
Okay, I'd be happy to tell you and recruit you to the cause. It'll be great.
We'll get to that after the meat and potatoes of the stream.
Okay.
So for anyone not familiar, this is it's basically just a spy action thriller. It sells itself as about the Dyatlov Pass incident, which is this crazy actual real world event of all these hikers got lost in the Ural Mountains during the Soviet Union era. And the circumstances of their death are just bizarre because they ended up scattered all over the mountain when the weather wasn't even very bad, and they were naked and covered in stab wounds and stuff. And there's just no explanation for what actually happened to these people, which is a great jumping off point for a mysterious thriller story, right?
Yeah. And then we immediately changed POV.
Yeah. That's actually one of my big complaints with this book is it's false advertising. If this had sold itself as, a Middle East PMC, black market Soviet scientist book, which is what it is, if it had sold itself as that, I would have said, excellent, I'm in, I love it. And even if it had then added more with actually, this is about a 60-year conspiracy going on in the Urals, that would have just been like, oh my God, I know about that. I've heard about this before. This is so cool. But instead, I bought a book thinking it was about like horrible survival against monsters and in Russia.
Yeah. I was thinking that we would see like, okay, so like the skimming of it is that they develop like this virus that when it gets into the body, it kind of turns you into like a zombie, right?
Virus.
Yeah, zombie virus. And I love zombies.
So do I. I'm writing one. Writing zombie story anyways.
Oh, I love it. So one of the things I was thinking about when I was kind of jotting my notes for today was that so there's that scene where Becker is like doing like the transporting and all of that, and then he gets attacked by
Oh,
Cap.
his introduction.
Yeah, his introduction. And like when I was writing my notes, my first thought was like, you know what would have been like really fucking cool is if the people that went and like intercepted him and like attacked him had actually been like infected by like that virus, because then we would have had like that intro to that. And it would have been a lot of people being like, what's wrong with these people? What's happening? And the mystery would have been focused like on them. And then we could have had more breadcrumbs, but instead it was just kind of I don't want to say it was rushed because that's doing a disservice to Will's writing.
No, I wouldn't say the story rushes. I think he maybe it kind of had a Marvel problem of the scope has to keep you have to keep raising the stakes.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't believe that is actually good advice.
Oh, I mean, like at some point you like it's the Goku complex, right? Like as soon as you save the world and you save the universe, and then once you're done saving the universe, you have to fight gods, and once you've become the ultimate god, like what do you do? Like what happens? Like, right?
Clearly, you fight the master of the universe's evil twin. Like, come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, that's what you do. But so that would have been like the one thing that I would have I really just wanted to see more zombies. That's what it is. My personal bias. I wanted to see more zombies and have the zombies be more of like the focus of the story, and then find out that, dude bro that he was transporting was the key to it all. So that would have been fun.
So on the back cover, it says, "For fans of World War Z, a chilling mystery, an ancient threat and a race against time to save humanity, inspired by the true events of the Dyatlov Pass incident." This has nothing to do with World War Z. Like, it
I
just
heard
happens to
that.
also be
Yeah.
like a military zombie book.
Yeah, I heard that from my friend because he, because I told him I read it and he went to go read the synopsis, and he's actually a big fan of World War Z. So when he read that, he was like,
I hope he means the book. The movie kind of sucked.
No, he did not like the movie. He did confirm that.
They're almost completely unrelated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh my God, that's why I bet he meant the movie.
Oh, that would make more sense.
This is actually really similar to the World War Z movie.
Oh, that would make more sense, yeah. You and I were thinking book and he was thinking movie, maybe. Yeah. And which goes back to my earlier comment of like this reads more like a screenplay to me.
You know, the funny thing is, had he actually written a film novel, aka a novel that can be directly translated to film, it would have been strictly better, because the worst writing was like the forced in exposition background stuff that you wouldn't be able to do in a movie.
Yeah.
That was clearly, in my opinion, the worst part of his writing. Which, if it weren't for the fact that it was so obviously like the film book dichotomy, it wouldn't be worth commenting on, because it's not that bad. Plenty of people do that, but it is wrong to the way that these the background relations got forced in.
Yeah, that was in some ways I was like, that's a really fun plot twist, but then like the way it was kind of brought in, it was almost like he's not just the bad guy, he's the bad guy that killed my dude bro back in the day, and I thought he was dead, but he's back, right? So that was one thing that happened that I was just kind of like, I don't know how I feel about this, but I wanted to say something that I actually did like about the book, because I didn't want to be too harsh.
Oh, I do like the book.
Yeah.
Let's not get distracted. I do recommend this book,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in the realm of, like, let's call it new media. I'm not sure if Critical Drinker calls himself Iron Age. By the way, hello, John A. Douglas. Hello. He honestly, I think Iron Age is kind of a self-identification thing. But it is referring to an actual change in the culture, I think. So he's part of the change for sure. For the sake of this video, I'm calling him Iron Age because I'm adding him to the Iron Age tier list I do.
We're identifying him for himself, I understand.
I might be starting to use the term the Age of the Wolf, actually, which is just the Nordic version of the same idea. And use that to refer to like the societal trend, whereas Iron Age are people like Iron Age Media and the Drink with Crazy and everyone with hashtag Iron Age in their bio and so on.
Yep, it makes sense.
God, where was I going with that? I like it. I recommend it.
I like it too. I actually had this conversation with Royce earlier today because we were talking about like when readers go in, they start like critiquing books, and I always think it's when writers do that, right? It's a little bit of a double-edged sword because the pedagogy at which we understand writing is at a different level than what a reader would understand. So when I was reading it, there were parts where I was like, okay, as a writer, I'm not quite sure about this, so I would have to like make myself like switch headspaces and be like, I am a reader right now. I am not critiquing this. There's lots of like I actually like the lady doctor. I mean, she had like two insufferable moments for me, but
All right, let's
overall,
talk
I
about
really
characters
liked
for a
her.
moment, shall we?
Oh yeah, sure.
I had 3 characters I liked.
Okay.
Uh, I liked Becker
Mhm.
eventually. I did not like his introduction. He made mistakes in the introduction, which we can talk about.
Mhm.
I liked Dalton, the doctor lady. And I liked the Mansi tribesman, Ukashenko, I think his name is.
Yeah, yeah.
That he was the only minor character I thought was given like an actual character, let's say. Everyone else was treated like was written like they were disposable and then treated as though they're disposable.
Yeah.
Like particularly the 2 other mercenaries that Becker has that get blown up by the car bomb.
Yeah, right away. Yeah. It was like it's really bad when you know something so well that when you see characters like, oh, you've got like death flags like all over you. That's really sad. Especially like that one
It's
lady
her
where she's
birthday coming up.
yeah, yeah, that was like the first thing. It's like my birthday. And I was like, oh, you're gonna die. Uh,
All right, so that I think that had that birthday interaction actually been reversed, you readers would have instantly liked Becker significantly more. If what's her name? I can't even remember because she was so inconsequential. But the woman who gets blown up, if she had been volunteering and Becker said, "Well, no, you're taking that day off. Are you crazy,
yeah, it's your
girl? That's your
birthday.
birthday."
Yeah.
And you would have had almost the exact same dialogue, but instead of the main character being forgetful about his, the private life of his subordinates, it would have
Mhm.
been him being conscientious of it, which
Mhm.
is a far more likable trait.
Yeah, yeah, different kind of save the cat. It's a social save the cat at that point. It's like,
Yeah.
you yeah. Yeah, and it's also showing that he's got like rapport and consideration for the people that work for him and risk their lives to work with him too, right? Because like the setting of the story is that they're doing guarded escort work. And I don't mean like, showing the leg escort. I mean like,
Yeah, they're
escort work.
bodyguards.
Yeah.
They are Iraqi PMC guards for
Yeah.
VIPs.
Yeah, yeah, and so, like, the thing that I can speak to on that is, like, when you do, like, that kind of work, like, it's a different kind of bond that you form with people, because in the military, if you talk to anybody in the military, we usually refer to each other as, like, brother and sister kinda thing, because it's, like, at the end of the day, when shit goes down, you have to make sure that the person on the left and right of you can stand up and hold up their rifle kinda situation, almost Spartan that way. And when you have that kind of mindset with people around you, it builds a different kind of relationship. So the fact that, I mean, forgetting birthdays, I do that pretty often.
So do
But
I. But
yeah,
that doesn't mean I'm not a good example of a character to put in a story.
but I try to make efforts to remember birthdays where I can. And and again, I don't think that makes him like an unlikable person, but I think that again, it adds to like kind of like this thing is about to happen, right? Because I don't know where I'm going quite with that train of thought other than
Yeah, so
you're
when I
right,
picked
I
up the
agree.
book, I was cursed with knowledge because a couple of people described this book as a paint by numbers thriller. And I
Oh,
was,
did
what
they?
does that mean? And then I read the book and I was like, this is paint by numbers. Like, I'm
Oh.
not sure I can describe it, but that is the exact feeling you get, where it's just like the it feels like the most standard set of toys to play with in the toy box to tell this kind of story, where it's just like, it's a birthday, that's why she gets blown up, so he goes on revenge. So, oh, we need a biological scientist to kidnap. Well, it's clearly from Russia. Who's he kidnapping? Well, it's American mercenaries hired by Russia, presumably.
Mhm.
I try to not ever say that the most logical or the tropey solution to a problem or a necessary element is wrong ever, because obviously you'll catch me doing that. because those are tropes because they're done well, but it really felt like everything was the most likely evolution of the story. I never felt surprised by the way it developed. Did you?
No, it was. I mean, I guess that goes back into like the safety of the genre kind of thing. Because you have like when you go in, you have expectations, and you're kind of like, well, how are they going to do this so that way it meets my expectation? You know, it's kind of like romance novels where you know that the two love interests will get together, fight about something probably because one doesn't butter toast the way that the other one wants, and then they'll overcome this difference, realize it makes them stronger because you can butter both sides of the toast, and then they'll run off into the sunset, right? But it's that moment of like, well, this like how, right? It's the how are they going to get there? And unfortunately, like I think because of the way that the prologue was written, like that set the seed that like that will be the solution somehow. And I remember there's like a scene where the hikers were talking to like that little kid in the beginning. I was like, well, he's going to be somehow, the Dusamox in some shape or form. I don't know how, but he will. So.
So, like I said, I did actually like the guy, especially with the return. At this point, we're 17 minutes in. To give a just to ground everyone in the plot, things kick off when a Russian scientist is kidnapped by strange mercenaries, and they take him to a research facility where they have him work on a virus, refine it to be like higher transmissibility, lower lethality slightly, so that it hits that runaway world-ending apocalypse level plague. Sorry, I got distracted by Acerades' comment there.
It's quite witty. I do like that.
And so the main character, Becker, is the guy that was supposed to be protecting Ivanov. And because he loses guys to the terrorists, let's call them, he takes it as a personal revenge story. Tries to track them down by stealing some files from the CID or whatever. Tracks them down to what turns out to be a test site of a remote village in Syria, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And that's when he runs into Dalton, who is a some form of doctor working for the World Health Organization. Epidemiologist, I think is her specific title.
Mm-hmm.
Dalton goes there because she gets reports of a outbreak there, so she just goes there for humanitarian purposes, and it turns out that zombies. And then they get arrested basically after escaping the zombies of the town. They get picked up by the American military, then they get attacked by Russians, and then they escape, and then they have to get like evac by the other forces of the Russians because it's actually like a splinter cell working apparently off of Soviet research. Because the current Kremlin is aware that there is this horrible world-ending disease, and oh my God, there's no cure, there's no vaccine. If this gets out, everyone dies. So the best way to make sure it doesn't get out is when they get to the research lab, one missile we'll do a thermobaric bomb in one building, and that will certainly kill all the viruses in there, and it will not just eject them out the windows.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, at that point, the virus has been improved, and they're on this world genocide plan of distributing it through international airports. And Becker and Dalton have to find a way to stop that, to catch that, and they set up a trap, blah blah blah. But the crux is that the agents dispersing the virus have gone dark; they can't be recalled, and oh no, they've already spread the virus in the airports. Now we have to go find the source so we can get a vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And while you were reading it and going, oh, this isn't how the military works, I was reading this going, oh, that's not how viruses work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The science of this pandemic makes no sense. This is very Hollywood contrived. Like, you cannot have that much viral duplication to get... Like, the zombie transformation takes like 6 hours or something. And it's just like, no, it doesn't. You cannot do that to somebody that fast. And if it does, it's just like... Let's not turn this into a science stream. I have put a lot of effort into what would it take for an actual world-destroying plague, because my cyberpunk setting actually takes place after such a world-destroying plague, and that's why things get rebuilt into, say, Bastion, one city containing 1 billion people. That's monitored enough that they don't have outbreaks. An ancient virus that gets thawed out of the permafrost in the Urals is not going to cause a virgin soil effect to modern humans. But that's the contrivance of the story, and they have to go recover samples so they can cure everybody super fast. And let's just ignore the fact that there's like a million ways the viruses could have accidentally gotten out from the airport during this whole escapade. Okay, turn your brain off. You're supposed to be reading and enjoying, right? And you can turn your brain off and read and enjoy, because it's just so transparent that these are the plot beats, and this is how you get the anticipation. This is how you get the danger. This is the things you're worried about is, there's like Spetsnaz coming in. Is this person going to get executed by the Kremlin? Are they going to get to there on time or whatever? There's a lot of genuine questions, because the story can branch out in a lot of different ways, because you don't really know what's going to work out. And that's the strength of the story, right? That's why I'm sitting here saying, no, actually, yes, I've complained for the last 22 minutes about this book. It is a recommendation.
We do like it. We just want to tell you our problems with it first.
Yeah, it's not a very good stream to just sit here going, oh my God, the gunshots were so good. And, I just loved the interrogation.
I loved it when he did the pew-pew. The pew-pew was really great, yeah.
Did you have any major problems that we haven't already touched on with the book?
I mean, some nitpicking on the military stuff. Like, I can tell you as somebody who's been in the military is that, like, the higher rank you get, like, the more, I mean, the pettiness was definitely there. Like, he had clued in on that very well. There was like this one scene where Becker, like, walked out and like assaulted, like, he had to be like an E3. So it's like low ranking.
Are we talking about when he's on the Russian ship or when he is with the Americans?
When he's with the Americans, like, he just walks out. Yeah. He just walks out and like moves with authority. And like, in some ways I get it, but like, the truth is, like, if you're going to be under lock and key like that, they've got 2 guys outside your door, and you can't even go to the bathroom without somebody escorting you, right? Like, that's how
would he get on TV otherwise. It's not like he could just like pull out his phone or pull out someone else's phone and start live streaming to social media.
Oh man, that would have been so hard.
That would have actually been a lot more interesting if he had like approached the way the technology is changing the world a bit more and drawn a contrast of like, oh yeah, well, back in the 60s this would have killed everyone, but it's 2020, we have the technology.
Yeah, that was like the one part. And I suspect that Will probably did go and talk to some folks about it, and he like did like some stretch at that part. But yeah, no, American military, if you're a person of interest, they're not going to let you go anywhere by yourself. And they're definitely not just going to let you walk around and like start like beating up.
Just go get drunk at the officers club. It's fine.
Yeah, go do that. Yeah. So that threw me a little bit. And then when he went to the news station to go do that plea, I was like, you have no idea, like, the real pandemonium that would have happened if you had done that. Like, that was in like an example that I can give you that did actually happen real world was back in 9/11, I was living in England at the time. And the identity of the people that were on the planes had not been revealed, but then the newscaster said, it's like, well, they suspected is from this area, right? And both my dad and I wasn't active military at the time, but I grew up in a military family, and the moment we heard that, we were like, what have you done? You have just condemned so many people, right? And the hate crime out in England, like, they don't like to talk about it, but the hate crime out in England like really skyrocketed, because next thing you know, these people that came from those areas had a whole bunch of locals that were out there being like, this is your fault. And they do that because they're afraid, right? And part of the reason that they kind of control the information that goes out into the world is because scared people do scary things. So when I got to that, I was just like, absolutely not. Like, I like that news lady, even though she was hungry for the story, your typical journalist, if she had heard or had an idea of what he was about to say, she would have been like, absolutely not. Like, that's not happening.
Okay, so let me devil's advocate here. would that still be like a standard reaction for a random news anchor in Turkey?
You're talking about the world at that point. It's like when you put out a story and you put out information, I get that you're trying to chase leads and stuff like that. But like all journalists know that their words have power in some shape or form. And maybe if they're a narcissist and they just want to get fame and glory, because I mean, we see plenty of people do that here on YouTube, right? They just clout chase all the time, right?
Do React contact until you dox someone that complaining about you.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So do something like that. I think the people in Turkey, in the case of your question, deserve a little bit more credit.
Fair enough.
But yeah, but yeah, no, that
But
that that
like
like that scene. I think that
going
scene
back
for
to
the
paint by
book.
numbers, there was no other way to connect back to Dyatlov Pass at that point because literally there was no path to get there.
Yeah, I like what. Okay, so Timo does have a point that some journalists don't have any morals at all, and I agree.
Hopefully,
Yeah,
the editors have legal sense.
right. Or
Or it's not a very good studio.
I think an easy fix for this in my brain, especially with all the head hopping that kept coming on. This is part of why it always felt like it was a movie script because of all the perspective changing that we were doing. Is if we had kind of started out with like the different points of views from individuals. So like we didn't meet like the guy that basically run the airport until it was time for him to show up, right? And I almost wish that we had kind of seen him and seen some kind of inkling about what was going to go down. Like maybe he was eating breakfast and he heard about like some more fighting that was going on in Turkey, and he's like, "Oh man, not again!" And thinking about how that was going to affect like the people that were coming into the Heathrow airport. And then maybe there could have been a journalist friend that Becker knew that he would sometimes get information from, like, "Hey, Becker's down in Turkey. Maybe I can message him and see if he knows anything about this," right? And then that person could have like responsibly like put out like the message about like, "Hey, there's this thing that's going on and only you guys could help us." So
all right, so here's a proposal.
mm.
Instead of actually starting in the Dyatlov Pass, because those aren't the characters we're continuing with. If the book had started with them in Heathrow Airport, where he is taking Ivanov from London to Baghdad or whatever, they could have had a character in there talking about the story of Dyatlov Pass, and you could have foreshadowed that with Ivanov getting like extremely uncomfortable with the conversation because he knows what actually happened there, and had that conversation move through the airport, introduce the security, the crowding, the threats, and use that to introduce Becker's competency. Because, okay, sure, it's London. We're not worried about you getting kidnapped here. It's almost impossible. However, it's my job to protect you, and Becker has to go through the rigmarole of analysis and such to get on the plane through that conversation. And then you go into the second scene, the second chapter is they're driving through Iraq and then they get attacked. So at that point, you have already been introduced to Becker. You have been convinced that he's good at his job. You would like him. And you would also theoretically at that point like Ivanov and not just have him be like some drunk in the back seat who's trying to make small talk with a guy who doesn't want to make small talk. And then the book would have started with the characters that would carry the story talking about something else. How do you rate that? Because I just came up with that off the top of my head from the
I'd give that a solid 8 out of 10. I'd have to read it to give it a 10 out of 10, but I really like it. Timo was asking if it's third person omniscient,
sort of?
And I don't. Yeah, it flips back and forth because sometimes it's like it's limited and then it's not.
It's like a camera with a narrator. The camera follows the POV character, and then you've got like that. Well, let me tell you about this backstory that you would have no way of knowing except, but I need to tell you like what the sexy, scary Russian lady is thinking right now. Right?
Yeah, she was fun.
The problem is like I like the trope. He didn't really use the trope well.
Yeah, I mean, like I liked the kind of minor twist that happened with her. But I think you said trope, and I'm like, all the characters are technically tropes, like straight from Tropopedia.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, but like the thing is, like, I argue for tropes because I think tropes have like their time and place. It's what you do with them. But if you like just keep it like at just the trope level, then yeah, it's not going to go anywhere. But if you kind of build off of it and make it something more, then that's really good. And in lots of cases, like, you know, we're talking about scary Russian chick. I was like, that's just your basic scary Russian badass, you know, chick. Like I was like, more. No, okay.
So my favorite version of that trope is Balalaika from Black Lagoon, if you're familiar.
I do. Yeah, that's a good one.
But she is so much more because like she's the leader of Hotel Moscow, and like her being in charge of the guys is like 99% of her motivation, which is that layer of, yes, she is the scary Russian lady who will have all your fingers chopped off in front of her and then shoot you herself. But you get the more. I try to actually lean into that with some of my characters at times, and hopefully I never just do a trope. Hopefully it's like, oh, but she's actually Elliot's boss, and she's actually a really good boss. Like, even though she does really enjoy showing up to a gunfight and killing the bad people, like when it comes down to like managing her personnel, she's like, no, she's having a breakdown. Go take her home. Like, she's new to this. Like, it happens. By the way, cute dog in the background.
Yeah, she owns this house.
My beast is laying upstairs right now and just barked at something. There might be a mailman. I don't know. I don't think I have to check that out. That's not too loud of barking.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like intruder bark. You might be okay.
Yeah.
I did like Lady Doctor. I really liked the story involving Lady Doctor, especially when they kind of talked about like the scars that she had on her arm. I thought that was really good of Will to do.
I enjoyed that, yeah. Like I said, there were 3 characters I liked. It was Becker, eventually Dalton. I basically liked her from her introduction, even though kind of a bland introduction of like, oh, they're at a refugee camp. She's treating people. She's, giving people the benefit of the doubt. Like I said, I liked her. And it was also nice to see that it was like a competent woman in the action sequence, but her competency is not the action. It's not Hollywood. Oh, she's gonna start going toe to toe with giant Russian fighters or anything.
I loved when it was like, it's my turn to interrogate this man. I was like, Lady Doctor gonna get real, and she sure enough did when she walked in there. I was like, yes. Oh, her bluff game was good in that. I really liked that.
Okay, so Johnny Douglas just posted. Can I highlight this? How does StreamYards work?
You click on it and then it'll pop up here in the corner. There you go.
I feel like there was, but I can't remember.
It was Becker. Yeah, there was a couple of times Becker's like, "I'll be fine," and it was like, "No, Becker, that's not how this story works."
I guess going into the car bomb, he basically said, "No, this will work."
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. That's like chapter 3, John.
But yeah, no, that's what you want there, John. Nah, it'll be fine. I always like his dialogue. Will's dialogue was so good for movies. I keep thinking this would have been such a great movie. Like if he had made this like into a film, I would have watched it and given it like 10 out of 10. I really would have. But there's like one part.
5 years, and I bet Angel Studios, I think, is the people working with Daily Wire will pick up one of his stories.
I know they're working with a couple people because they've got one that they're working with a different one to do the Snow White that's coming out next year. It's like yeah. But there was like this one scene where like they're out there in Saudi Arabia and Dalton's like, this is where it began. And he looks at her and it's like, this is where it will end. I'm like, oh my goodness. This is such a movie like.
That's a good point. Those memorable lines, I guess, you can give them like cinematic weight in a movie. But if you're just in prose, you can't like stop and bring attention to a single line of dialogue. It just has to flow and stand on its own. So books tend to not have dialogue that stands out. Of course, people will bring up opening lines is what books have instead. The sky was the color of a television tuned to a dead channel, right?
Yeah. I think my favorite line was, "I felt bad about eating her." That was my favorite line. I don't remember the book. It's just the line I remember.
I think that's definitionally a bad line then if you don't remember where it's from.
It's been a long time. I read so many books. Like, I really hate saying it that way. Like, I don't take notes very often, except when I know I have to come on to podcasts. I was actually talking to somebody because they were talking about Kitty in the Midnight Hour, right? And I was like, oh, I remember that book. I remember I liked it. And they're like, what else do you remember? It's like, I think werewolves are in it, right? Like, that was it. And I'm like, I read this book like 15 years ago. So the fact I remember it and like it, I think is the best thing I can do for you.
Yeah, so I read voraciously until I was about 15,
Mm-hmm.
when I discovered online manga piracy sites, and
Oh,
then I
like you do.
voraciously consumed the manga instead.
You read something else, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never stopped reading, but the thing is that, like, my parents kept all the paperbacks that I read, like,
Mhm.
buckets and buckets of them, because they were very supportive of reading. Because it's like, "Oh, it's better than video games," right? Even though I was playing thousands of hours of video games. I have gone back to those buckets and been like, "Oh, yeah, that's a book. I remember the title. I have no idea what that book is about." Like,
Yeah,
I think I read the
I've only got
Genre
these
series or
ones.
something. I
Y
literally could not tell you the first thing about it.
Yeah, I only have these books because these are the only ones that I'm willing to move with. When I grew up in a military family, obviously it was like what you could put
Backlight.
in the box. Yeah, and so you don't really have like you don't really want to take a lot with you all the time. So I used to like either go to the library or the thrift store, read a book, return it, kind of thing. So yeah.
Fair enough. I mean, theoretically, there is a future for like digital libraries because I got an Audible membership
Hmm.
5 years ago or something. It's one ebook or one audiobook every month. I
Hmm.
have something like 120 in my library now, and I can scroll back to the beginning and be like, "Oh yeah, Bobaverse, that was fun. It was a little atheistic cringe and fedora tipping, and by a little I mean a lot,
Hmm.
but it was still a fun book." What were the plot points again? That was 5 years ago, and I've read several hundred books since.
Hmm.
Like, oh my god, just 2 days ago, I was watching Jujutsu Kaisen with my brother.
Hmm.
I don't know if you're up to date. Do you watch that?
I think I'm on episode 6, but it's because I watch anime with two other people, so I can't like devote single time to one series right now.
I will be vague then because it's good and you should catch up. A character goes, a character is like doing a summoning and she just goes, Zenin Toji. And it's like, and for me, I'm just like, okay, I've heard probably 500 Japanese names this week. And my brother's just like, oh, that's from the prequel. Like,
Oh, that's amazing. I respect that like a great deal.
yeah, I don't know how he does it.
My
That's part of
friend
what
does
makes it
that.
nice to watch with him because he remembers every name, even though he actually watches like twice as much anime as I do. I don't know how he does it.
I remember voices like I can listen to an anime and hear a voice actor. I'll be like, "Oh, that's Vic, and Vic has been in this, and Vic has done that, and Vic has done all of these things." And I really wish they would let Vic come back, but people hate Vic, and I hate them. So
Timo, I deny all allegations. And actually, I will deny by pointing out that if I had my camera upstairs, I bought all the manga I pirated as a teenager.
I love that.
That's my defense. Once I had the money, I went and paid for it.
I was a pirate until I could afford it.
Literally, yeah. Like, so you know what? That's kind of a problem. Is there is a certain amount of consumption rate where you just can't justify the amount of money because one volume of say Frieren Beyond Journey's End, which is what I'm trying to get right now, is $10, and that's a cheap
Mhm.
manga actually. The series has like 8 volumes right now, which means to own it all is $80,
Mhm.
which personally I can afford that. But like, how many? If I was buying every series that I keep up on, and if it wasn't for the fact that companies like J Novel and Shonen Jump, well, it will give you the most recent chapter for free. It actually would get out of hand how expensive it
Mhm.
is.
Mhm. Yeah, and then you're stuck in this slippery slope. I don't know if Royce is still here. He hates that phrase. But it's where you basically like if you don't buy like the physical media, you have to risk them coming in and either taking it away or changing it, right?
I'm sorry, one sec.
Uh-oh. It's me, guys. How you doing? I get to run this podcast now. Oh man, he's got the berserk sniff on the back. Oh man, that room is so cool to me now. Oh my goodness. This is where I get to creep on his room and just basically judge everything that he has. He's gonna come back and hear me. Let's see. Oh, he's got good. Oh. Man, if I could just make that screen bigger, I could creep on his bookshelf, but I can't. Man, that just blows. But going back to the book before he comes back. Oh no, what does that mean? Sorry, StreamYard did a thing, it scared me. I think one of the interesting things that I was about, he's back. I can't hijack his stream anymore. And he's back with food. What is this?
Neighbor has people over in the driveway, and this one, can I get her in camera?
Oh, look at that snoot. Oh.
This one was defending the house. All right, so you didn't say anything ban-worthy while I was gone.
They were basically watching me creep on your room. That's what they were doing.
I like my room.
It's a great room. I was respecting it.
I've definitely had it called like gamer cringe, but that's fine.
Oh no, I mean, like this is the office I work in. My gamer cringe is on the other side of this office, so you're good.
This isn't even the worst room in my house.
Yeah. All right. I really like Lady Doctor. Lady Doctor, I thought was fun. Becker was okay. I feel bad that I think Becker's okay because if I don't really love like the main character, I feel like I start having like I just like I want to fight the book, right?
Yeah. I mean, like that kind of brings me back to my point of there wasn't a very good introduction to Becker, and I think it's because he actually showed multiple negative character traits before the violence started.
Mm-hmm.
And then Will treated it as, oh, but he knows what's what in the fight, and that makes it all good. But like, he's not personable, he's not conscientious to his underlings, and he's brash and got into a fight that he had no business being into because he didn't think it through, and he got people killed. That's Becker's introduction.
Yeah.
No shit, you don't really like him. Those are 3 major reasons to not like somebody. I try to be very aware of that nowadays as I'm writing. Like that's definitely something that I didn't realize the importance of in my earlier works at times. And it's actually something I'm kind of worried about with the cyberpunk romance I was telling you about because chapter 1, like the majority of it, he's like burned out, hates his job, and he's basically, and most of the chapter is justifying why his job is miserable. But in like the dystopic corporate life, nothing is real. Like everyone's faking their work. Like it's just crap. Like it's office crap. And then the chapter ends with, and then the girl shows up, basically.
Oh, that's the meet cute.
Yeah, no, I'm actually pretty happy with how the meet cute works. But you have to read like almost a full chapter of like him scamming HR to get like his full pay without actually doing any work because he's like, this is the stupidest company. They don't even realize that every other employee here is incompetent and so on. And you'll either kind of vibe with the fact that corporate life is meaningless, or you're going to be really put off by that if you've never worked a job that was truly meaningless. So that's going to have to be edited and improved because it does matter to get the reader to root for your character and want them to end up with a better life.
Yep, it sure does.
All right, so we are at 45 minutes, which means for typically I try to do these at 1 hour, and we've got 15 minutes here. If you want to plug your stuff, I do always invite guests. Your links are in the description if it updated.
I did see them; they are there.
Wonderful.
Well, my name is Carrow Brown. I'm an urban fantasy author. I write romance on the side as Faye Black. I work over at LaterPress as the executive assistant, and I guess my plugs is that you guys should support me in the GoFundMe movement. And since you actually said let's talk about this at the end, this is a great time to talk about. So this is the origin story of how it began. Many moons ago, as in 3 moons ago, Royce reached out and said, hey, do you think it would be possible for the Ripperverse team to come and do a talk so that way people can meet like the crew and stuff like that? And I was like, oh, yeah, of course, right? So we all assembled together and we went to Royce's stream. And at one point, Royce made the mistake of being like, yeah, I should probably get my wife a goat. And he's like, no, I'm not getting my wife a goat because like, I'm not doing it. And me and Andrew being us, were kind of like, why don't you get your wife a goat? And the next thing you know, Oliver Perverse was just kind of like, yeah, you should just get your wife a goat. Like, why is that so hard? Right.
Well, you can't get a goat. You need 2.
Well, for me, he needs 3 because it's the Billy Goat Gruff curse at that point, right? But so that's how it started, and then I do like to troll people with great affection. So it started with me being like, I tagged his wife on Twitter and said, "Don't worry, the mission to get you the goat is still ongoing. I have it on my agenda." And I took a screenshot of my reoccurring event to troll Royce every week, and he was just like, "What is this?" And I'm not done, because then I went and made a Twitter handle called the Goat Fund Me, which I basically like go and I troll him on, right? And then I also will like use that to go and like retweet all of the promotional stuff that shows up on Wednesday to help get it more visibility. And so that's pretty much it. And I have more in the works. I've discussed things. I've got plans. This goat will happen.
All right. Let's talk urban fantasy for a moment, because it's something I like to field at people and try and start this argument. Define urban fantasy.
Define urban fantasy. Another way to say it would be contemporary fantasy, which basically means it's fantasy and occult themes that are taking place in a modern day setting.
Okay, so I argue that we need to start diversifying the genre label, and I propose urban gothic, to single out the most common set of monsters. Because if you're talking about modern day with vampires and werewolves and witches, which I feel like is most of urban fantasy, that really needs its own label. Because when you start looking at like, well, okay, is Jujutsu Kaisen urban fantasy?
Yeah, that would be considered urban fantasy. Well, like Jim Butcher writes urban fantasy, Kevin Hearn writes urban fantasy.
God, I need to review Grave Peril before I forget everything about it. I just read Dresden Files 3 and it was good.
I've read all of it. So if you want to talk about it, let me know. I usually like remember. Actually, I told you I don't remember a lot of books. I remember all of Jim's books. So
nice.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I should. Unfortunately, I'm going on vacation right after this stream, and I am deciding whether or not I'm going to do a quick 10-minute recording to schedule for Monday. I think I'm just going to skip, to be honest. I'm not a professional YouTuber, okay?
I'm not either. You're good.
But yeah, the quick version on Dresden Files is book one was very uninspired, and I was just like, this cannot be this popular. And then book 2 with the werewolves was terrible. Like, it was just actually bad.
Yeah,
and then Grave Peril, he must have signed a contract with the devil or something, because it was one of the best books I've read this year.
I know, most fans of like Jim always say like just ignore book 2, right? Like we always like he was going through some stuff while he was waiting for publication. And the thing about book 1 is if you take a look at like Jim's books for Dresden Files, they start off skinny and they get fat real quick. And the reason,
I'm an audiobook reader for Dresden Files. I guess I will see the recording time.
Yeah, so it goes from 8 hours up to it starts at 16, right? And the reason it's like that, so here's like some insider publisher shit, is that when you get traditionally published and you don't really have like a name for yourself quite at that point, the first thing that they do is they make your first book of your series feel like a standalone. So if you read Dresden Files, like the very first one, you can tell like it's wrapped up enough that if it's not popular, they won't renew it. But it did get very popular because Jim's humor in there is actually one of the big selling points for it. And at that point, I think after book 3, they just left his shit alone and basically said, have fun. So that was exciting because then he could pretty much write the story how he wanted to. And so we talked earlier about how Will Jordan, like how I feel like it would have been better if he had made it a screenplay for a movie and it had been a movie kind of thing. Jim's writing is actually for comic books. If you go in there and if you listen to the narrative and the way that he describes things, it's almost like it's made for, doing comics with the pacing and everything else that's going on. And kind of like, you can almost feel like it's the dramatic, like 1 to 2 page spread of something that's going on.
Yeah, when he pulls out his last reserves of willpower he didn't even know he had for an even bigger spell than he knew he was capable of.
I mean, you have to do that.
You don't have to. I write epic fantasy, and I circumvented that by just outright stating the main character can't be killed. He will Wolverine regenerate from anything. The question is, what happens outside of the fact that he is sword fighting someone to death?
Well, and the thing about, like, as you move further into, like, the Jim Butcher, stories, like, that last reserve of energy, that really goes away. I feel like the editors over at the publishing house had something to do with that. But yeah, the shitstorms that, like, Jim gets into, it's always kinda like, "I know you're gonna be successful, I just don't know how," right? And the joke is that Harry always starts at, like, 1 hit point left at one point. Like, every time the story starts, he's like, "I'm just gonna drag myself across the ground through this plot," so it's always fun, but yeah.
Is there a spin-off series in the same world by Jim about a different detective? So I was trying to
Um,
explain the book I was reading to one of my coworkers, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Detective Shrike or something like that."
there might be. I haven't read that person, but I do know that the thing. I mean, here's the thing about urban fantasy. At some point, it's either going to be like a strong female character going off and doing strong female character things, or it's going to be an occult detective of some sort doing occult detective things, right? Like that's kind of the way it works. And and it's either going to be the Sealy courts or the vampire courts, or one of the organizations that come together to like fuck over the life.
Yeah, so
That
I come back. We gotta call it urban gothic because we all know what's going on here. That we know it's the most popular thing.
I think I mean, they go to those because those are the ones that people can identify like really quickly. Like in my first book that I wrote,
Well-trodden tropes, right?
yeah. In my first book that I wrote, I actually had a vampire who owned a club, and immediately somebody was like, "I'm about to put your book down because you have a vampire with a club." And I was like, "Listen, it's not taking place at the club, and he's not the main character. Just get through this, please." But that was one of those fun moments I had where, the stereotypes and the tropes, do get exhausting. Not to deviate and talk about my work too much, but like one of my friends actually picked
We
up
got 8 more
ISOM.
minutes.
Oh, you got 8 more minutes? Okay, fantastic. I'll use 5. But one of my friends picked up ISOM and he was kind of like, "Well, is this like Luke Cage?" And I was like, "It's not Luke Cage." And so we kind of had like this conversation about like the similarities he was seeing to Luke Cage. And so every time he brought up a similarity, I had to show him other examples about how it's a common storytelling tactic or how it's often seen in different medias and stuff like that. And then, that was when he understood that it's not like that. But I mean, there's some things like in comic books and fiction writing and everything else that we kind of go to because it works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are fundamental reasons it works.
Yeah.
I'm actually. I need to put together some proper thoughts on. I think the comics have created certain iconics that are the reason Marvel and DC have a stranglehold on superheroes, and why people like Eric will write a new character and they go, "Isn't that just like Luke Cage?" Although I'm not sure how iconic Luke Cage actually is, but personally, I think Batman and Spider-Man and Superman are so synonymous with their type of story
Hmm.
that you can't get away from the comparison, and they really need to go into public domain so that people
Yeah.
stop looking at that comparison as like a cheap knockoff
They're
because
they're
they're just
always going
so
to do that
fundamental.
though. Like the comparison thing is the way to unfortunately communicate. So I worked in film and TV for a little while, and anytime we would talk about a script or something that was going through, we would have to say it's like this and this put together, right? Like they always
Yeah.
want to know that comparison because that kind of like it sets up like expectations. And I'm not going to let myself get taken away too much because you had a fun question in here. I thought we could ask or
Akasa,
answer.
by
Yeah,
chance?
yeah, yeah.
I believe this is for you because Akasa already knows my take. So, what is your take on the seething hatred so many webfic authors have for TradPub and the monetizability of serial fiction via Patreon? I'm not sure if you're familiar with sites like Royal Road, because it somehow is enormous and also ignored, even though like Amazon's bestsellers list are topped with stories that started on Royal Road, and people just don't
Hmm.
realize. So,
So my so there's a reason I'm not traditionally published anymore. I used to be traditionally published, and part of the reason I don't do it anymore is because it feels very limiting, right? And unfortunately, I have like seen situations where like authors will talk to like a webfic writer and then take like their idea, right? It's like, oh my goodness, you have like no integrity whatsoever. But I guess my thing about traditional publishing is that they often take from the indie sphere in so many different ways, like not even fun, cute ways. For a while, indies, whenever they were doing trailers for their books, right, like that was just an indie thing, but it was popular. So then traditional publishing came in and started to do it too, but because their budget's, bigger, obviously they can do more with it, right? So it puts us back at a disadvantage in that sense. And the basic truth of it is that if people like what you do and they like what you write, then they're going to want to support you. And I would probably advise people to like not linger too much on the animosity between the two schools, because traditional publishing is going through a really bad transition period right now where they're trying to survive. And you can see this evidence when you go to bookstores like Barnes and Noble, right? Go take a look and see what tables are in the middle and what they're selling.
Shop?
Yeah, it's the manga shop now. But if you go take a look at their center tables and their front cases that they have, they're not selling like debut authors or anything else like that anymore. They're selling stuff that's been selling for like 30 years, right?
Yep. Yeah. I often have to explain to people that the traditional publishing houses are propped up by old books that are like plastered all over. The top 10 science fiction books of all time, Dune by Frank Herbert. They're propped up by that, self-help, erotica, and cookbooks.
Yep.
They are not making money by competing with me. Like, I'm releasing new, I'm trying to update Cyberpunk. This is like an optimistic Blade Runner in a lot of ways. They aren't putting money into that unless the author's name is Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, so like 90% of their budget goes to 1% authors. That's just how it is. But once indies have figured out like how to do like their own print on demand and things like that, then I don't know what's going to happen to traditional publishing houses. But I feel because there are so many authors that are able to reach their readers in various different ways, things are about to change. I don't know quite how much, but I know it's going to be hectic. I would advise you to get your own website if you do not already have a website.
JamesCrack.com.
Well, I mean, anybody who's watching. Like, if you're an author and you don't have your own website to sell your stuff or promote your stuff, go ahead and do that. Maybe I should say that again for Andrew, because I don't think Andrew has his own website yet.
Mine looks like crap, and it's pretty easy to get a crap website up. As long as you just you want to get the domain, and then you can just tell people like, hey, this is the domain. And, as you take off, you can make it better. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, and there's some other websites like LaterPress as well. I've been experimenting with that, where it's like a subscription service where if they pay you like so much like per year, they basically get access to whatever you have that's part of that subscription. Or you could also have like your regular books for sale. And it works pretty much like an EPUB or a web reader at that point. So it's whatever folks are comfortable with. But yeah, no, it's just the whole thing is changing right now. So just have fun with it.
Exciting times, right? I figure as long as I keep my quality up, I'll be able to figure it out, I think.
Yeah, I think you'll be good. All right. Thank you for letting me hijack your stream to answer that question.
2 minutes. I think this is just thank you for coming on. Oh, actually, I might just talk to you about this on Gilded. The reason I want to talk about urban fantasy is I have like this planned trilogy on my huge list of things to do, where the main character is a monster hunter because monsters have shown up on Earth, but like weird monsters, not vampires and werewolves and stuff. He's a monster hunter. She's a monster technically. And it's an odd couple romance from there because he's supposed to kill her, but he's also like, what? No. I think that is just a fun chemistry option. But if I say it's urban fantasy, people are going to have so many expectations, and then they're going to be like, so sandworms have taken over Nevada? Excuse me?
Yeah, that sounds like, yes, do talk to me on Gilded. I wanted to address the Patreon thing. Patreon's very fickle, and if they don't like you for whatever reason, they'll just close down your entire account. So I always have a hard time trusting them with stuff like that. So the crowdfunding sites, man, they be scary sometimes if they don't like you.
Yeah, it's dangerous, but like there's genuinely more money going to creators through Patreon than anywhere else. Unless your name is Eric July and you have a book for pre-order.
That would be nice. I wish I could be that successful.
20-year career in music first?
I think it was 50. No, yeah, we'll go with that. 20-year, yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. This was a great chat. I'm happy to talk about Dresden Files sometime. Maybe after book 4 will make more sense. You going to be doing Frankenstein next week?
I can reread it, sure.
Cool. Hopefully we'll actually have like a panel on, because it was a pretty popular book with the book club. And if you viewer are listening and interested in the book club, it's totally free. In fact, I'm choosing books you should be able to get at your library. You just have to join the Gilded that is linked in the description. All right. Thank you very much. I'm hitting the end stream button now.
Bye, friends. Bye. 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 Bye.